The red dust of Mars swirled outside the observation window as Lieutenant Sarah Chen stared at her monitor screens. 300 years had passed since the Zethian invasion forced humanity to flee Earth. Now only scattered settlements remained on the homeworld, and barely 1 billion people lived under alien occupation. Sarah worked alone in the monitoring station, watching for threats that never came anymore. The coffee in her cup had gone cold hours ago. Night shift on Mars meant silence, boredom, and the constant ache of knowing Earth hung in the sky above, so close yet impossibly far. The Zethians controlled everything now. They had turned humanity's birthplace into a mining colony, stripping resources while treating the remaining humans like cattle. Sarah's fingers moved across the keyboard, checking the same readings she checked every night. Radiation levels normal, no ship movements in the outer system, the Zethian patrol schedule running like clockwork, everything exactly as it had been for decades. Then the alarm screamed. Sarah jumped, spilling her cold coffee across the console. Her hands flew across the controls, silencing the noise and pulling up the data. Her eyes went wide. A gravitational anomaly had appeared at the edge of the solar system, massive and growing. Something was coming out of faster than light travel, something enormous. Her first thought was the Zethians bringing more ships. Her second thought died as the computer finished its calculations. The mass reading was impossible. Nothing that large could travel through FTL space. The energy signature alone would tear a normal ship apart. Sarah's fingers trembled as she pulled up the signature analysis. The computer compared it against every known Zethian vessel type. No match. She expanded the search to include historical databases, going back centuries to before the invasion. The computer beeped. Match found. Sarah read the words on her screen 3 times before they made sense. HFY Indomitable, United Earth Space Command. The name came from before the fall, from the desperate days when humanity built its first and only supercarrier. The ship that was supposed to save 50 million people during the evacuation. The ship that vanished 300 years ago, lost to a drive malfunction during the emergency jump. It couldn't be. The Indomitable was gone, lost to time and space. Everyone knew that. Sarah had learned about it in school, studied the disaster as a cautionary tale about experimental technology. 50 million people, gone in an instant when the prototype jump drive misfired. But the signature matched perfectly. Sarah activated the emergency communication system, her hands shaking so badly she had to try twice. She connected to the resistance network on Earth, the encrypted channel that supposedly stayed hidden from Zethian scanners. "This is Mars Station 7, she said into the microphone. "I need to speak with Marcus Rivera immediately." "Priority Alpha." Static crackled for a moment. Then a gruff voice answered. "This better be good, Chen. Do you know what time it is down here?" "Marcus, something's coming. Something big." "The Zethians bringing reinforcements?" Marcus sounded tired. He always sounded tired these days. Leading Earth's resistance meant carrying the weight of a dying world. "No, it's..." "Marcus, the signature matches the Indomitable." Silence on the line. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in the quiet. "Say that again," Marcus finally said, his voice careful and controlled. "The UESC Indomitable, the lost supercarrier. It's here, Marcus." "It's really here." More silence. Then Marcus spoke quickly. "Keep monitoring. Send me everything, and Chen, don't tell anyone else yet. If this is real, we need to control how the information spreads. If it's not..." He didn't finish the sentence. Sarah understood. False hope could break the resistance faster than any Zethian weapon. She turned back to her screens and watched the massive object move through space. It was still far out beyond Neptune's orbit, but it was heading toward the inner system. Heading home. On Earth, Marcus Rivera stood in the basement of a ruined building in what used to be New York City. The resistance cell around him looked up from their weapons and maps as he ended the call. These 15 men and women represented the last organized military force on the planet. There were other cells scattered across Earth, but communication was dangerous and meetings even more so. "What's happening?" asked Maria Santos, his second in command. The scar across her face, a gift from Zethian interrogators, twisted as she frowned. Marcus hesitated. If he told them and it was wrong, he would destroy morale. If he didn't tell them and it was real, he would have wasted precious time. "We might have incoming friendlies," he said carefully. "I need everyone ready to move in 6 hours. Full combat gear." The question started immediately, but Marcus raised his hand for silence. "That's all I know right now. Get some rest while you can." He walked to the corner of the basement where an ancient radio transmitter sat hidden beneath rubble. His fingers found the hidden switch and he began broadcasting on the old resistance frequency. Other cells needed to know something was happening, even if he couldn't tell them what. In orbit above Earth, the Zythian occupation fleet detected the anomaly at the same moment. Warlord Crixath stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the readings with his 4 eyes narrowed in suspicion. His scales, a deep blue that marked him as military caste, gleamed under the harsh lights. "Mass reading?" he demanded. "Equivalent to 20 of our largest battleships, Warlord," his sensor officer replied, fear making his voice shake. "The signature is unknown." Crixath's tail lashed in agitation. Nothing that large should exist. The Zythian Dominion controlled this entire sector of space. They had crushed the humans easily 300 years ago, taking their pathetic little planet in a matter of months. What remained of humanity posed no threat. "Mobilize the fleet," Crixath ordered. "Whatever this is, we will destroy it before it reaches the inner system." The Zythian warships began moving into attack formation, 60 vessels that had kept Earth under control for 3 centuries. They had never faced a real challenge here. The humans had no fleet, no weapons that could threaten them. This would be no different. Back on Mars, Sarah watched her screen as the massive object continued its approach. It was moving faster now, its speed increasing as it entered the outer system. The computer tracked its trajectory. It would reach Earth in less than 72 hours. Then her communication system activated on its own. Sarah stared as the ancient emergency broadcast system, unused for 300 years, suddenly came to life. A voice filled her station, transmitted on frequencies that shouldn't work anymore. "This is Fleet Admiral Catherine Zhao of the United Earth Space Command vessel Indomitable," the voice said, clear and strong despite the distance. "To all human forces in the Sol system, this is not a drill. We have returned home. Prepare for liberation." Sarah sat frozen as the message repeated. She looked out her window toward Earth, where billions of humans had suffered for 3 centuries, where hope had died so long ago that most people didn't even remember what it felt like. The Indomitable had come home. 50 million people thought lost forever were coming back. Sarah reached for her communication panel with shaking hands. She broadcast the message on every frequency she could access, sending it to every human settlement on Mars, every resistance cell on Earth, every hidden outpost in the asteroid belt. The silence was breaking. After 300 years of darkness, humanity's lost children were returning, and they were bringing war with them. The Indomitable moved through space like a mountain made of steel. Admiral Catherine Zhao stood on the bridge, her gray hair tied back in a military knot, her uniform bearing medals from battles fought across the galaxy. Behind her, the command crew worked at their stations with the efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. 300 years. That's how long Earth had suffered. But for those aboard the Indomitable, time had moved differently. Relativity and suspended animation meant only 50 years had passed for them subjectively. 50 years of traveling across the galaxy, surviving, learning, and building toward this single moment. "Distance to Earth?" Catherine asked. 60 hours at current speed, Admiral, replied Commander James Park, her executive officer. "The Zythian fleet is moving to intercept." Catherine nodded. She had expected nothing less. The Zythians were predators, and predators didn't surrender territory easily. But they had made one critical mistake 300 years ago. They had let some humans escape. "Open a channel. All frequencies. I want every human in this system to hear this." The communication officer worked quickly. "Channel open, Admiral." Catherine took a breath. 50 million people aboard this ship had waited 3 centuries for this moment. 1 billion more on Earth had suffered in chains. The words had to be right. "People of Earth," she began, her voice steady and strong. "This is Admiral Catherine Zhao of the Indomitable. 300 years ago, we left as refugees. We were running, desperate, trying to save as many lives as we could. Our jump drive malfunctioned and threw us across the galaxy. Everyone thought we were lost. We thought we would never see home again." She paused, looking at the view screen showing Earth in the distance. That blue marble, scarred but still beautiful. "But we didn't give up. We couldn't. Because we knew you were here, suffering under occupation. So we survived. We explored. We learned from every alien species we met. We took their technology and made it better. We built weapons and ships. We trained generations of soldiers. And every single person aboard this vessel had one dream: to come home, to free our people, To make the Zethians pay for what they did. Catherine's voice grew harder. We are not refugees anymore. We are the United Earth Space Command, and we have come home to stay. To our brothers and sisters in chains, hear this, rise up, fight. We will break your chains together. She gestured, and the communication officer cut the channel. On Earth, Marcus Rivera listened to the broadcast with tears streaming down his face. Around him, his resistance fighters stood in stunned silence. Then Maria Santos let out a whoop of joy, and suddenly everyone was shouting, crying, embracing each other. Get everyone moving, Marcus said, wiping his eyes. Every cell, every fighter. We coordinate with the Indomitable and hit the Zethians from inside while they handle the fleet. Marcus, Maria said quietly, we have maybe 10,000 fighters across the whole planet. The Zethians have hundreds of thousands of occupation troops. I know, Marcus replied, but we have something we haven't had in 300 years. We have hope. The message spread across Earth like wildfire. In underground bunkers, humans listened and wept. In labor camps, prisoners whispered the words to each other. In the ruined cities, people looked up at the sky and saw the future approaching. The Zethians heard it too. Warlord Crixath crushed the armrest of his command chair, his claws digging deep into the metal. Humans, he hissed. Always so confident. Always so foolish. His fleet was already in position. 60 warships, each one powerful enough to destroy a city. Whatever this Indomitable was, it would break against his fleet like waves against a cliff. All ships attack formation Delta, Crixath ordered. When they get within range, I want overwhelming firepower. Destroy them quickly. The Zethian ships moved into a formation they had used 1,000 times before. It was designed to concentrate firepower while minimizing exposure. It had won them countless battles across their empire. It would prove completely inadequate. The Indomitable continued its approach, not slowing, not deviating. As it got closer, Earth's remaining satellites and Sarah's station on Mars began sending detailed scans. What they revealed made Sarah's mouth go dry. The supercarrier that had left Earth 300 years ago had been a desperate construction. A massive hull wrapped around civilian habitats equipped with the best weapons humanity could build in a few months. It had been impressive for its size but crude by military standards. What returned was something else entirely. The hull showed signs of extensive modification. Armor plating that gleamed with an unknown alloy covered every surface. Weapons ports dotted the ship like stars, thousands of them. Shield generators hummed with power that made Sarah's instruments spike, and the energy signature coming from the drive core was beyond anything Earth had ever built. Marcus, are you seeing this data? Sarah transmitted. I'm seeing it, Marcus replied from Earth. I don't understand half of it. The Indomitable isn't just a supercarrier anymore, Sarah said, her voice filled with awe. It's a mobile fortress. They've been upgrading it for 50 years with technology from across the galaxy. Aboard the Indomitable, Catherine watched the Zethian fleet approach. Her tactical officer displayed the enemy formation on the main screen. 60 ships, Catherine said. They think that's enough. Should we launch fighters, Admiral? Asked Commander Park. Not yet. Let them make the first move. I want to see their capabilities. Catherine leaned back in her chair. But bring shields to full power and charge all weapon systems. Let's show them what humanity learned in the dark between stars. The distance closed. The Zethian fleet moved into firing range. Crixath gave the order, and 60 ships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the fleets, a wave of destruction meant to overwhelm any defense. The Indomitable's shields flared to life. The attacks hit the barrier and dissipated harmlessly. The shield technology, adapted from 3 different alien species and improved by human engineers, cycled through frequencies faster than the Zethian weapons could adjust. Return fire, Catherine ordered calmly. Target their formation center. Main batteries only. The Indomitable's primary weapons fired. The beams that lanced out were unlike anything the Zethians had seen. They weren't pure energy or pure kinetic rounds. They were hybrid weapons that combined both, designed to penetrate shields and armor simultaneously. 3 Zethian battleships exploded in the first salvo. 2 more lost power as the beams carved through their hulls. The neat formation broke apart as ships tried to scatter. Launch fighters, Catherine ordered. All wings. Show them how we fight. The Indomitable's hangar bays opened and fighters poured out like angry insects. But these weren't the crude spacecraft humanity had flown 3 centuries ago. These were sleek, fast craft with shields, advanced weapons, and pilots who had trained in combat across the galaxy. The fighter wings hit the scattered Zethian formation like a hammer. The aliens tried to respond with their own fighters, but the human pilots moved with a coordination and skill that spoke of decades of experience. Every maneuver was perfect. Every shot counted. On Earth, humans watched the battle through whatever screens they could access. They saw the Zethian fleet, the force that had occupied their world for 300 years, being torn apart. They saw humanity's lost children fighting with a ferocity and skill that made the Zethians look like amateurs. Marcus sent out the signal to all resistance cells. 3 words: now we rise. Across Earth, humans grabbed weapons and struck. They hit Zethian supply depots, communication centers, barracks. The attacks were small, almost insignificant compared to the battle in space. But they meant everything. They meant humanity was fighting back on both fronts. In orbit, Crixath watched his fleet die. In less than an hour, he had lost 20 ships, 20. Against a single enemy vessel. Retreat, he snarled. All ships fall back to Earth orbit. Send a priority message to Sector Command. We need reinforcements. All available ships. The surviving Zethian vessels broke off and ran. The Indomitable didn't pursue. It simply continued its steady approach to Earth. Catherine watched them go. How long until sector reinforcements arrive? Computer estimates 10 days, Admiral, replied her intelligence officer. The Zythians will send everything they have, probably 300 ships or more. Catherine nodded slowly. She had expected this too. One battle won did not mean the war was over. Open a channel to Earth resistance forces, she ordered. It's time we met our brothers and sisters face to face. The drop pods fell through Earth's atmosphere like meteors. Marcus Rivera watched them streak across the night sky from the rooftop of his headquarters, a mixture of wonder and fear in his chest. 300 years since humans had seen their own ships return home. 300 years of waiting. The pods landed in a cleared area outside the city ruins. Marcus and his team approached cautiously, weapons ready despite knowing these were allies. Trust had become a rare commodity during the occupation. The first pod opened with a hiss of releasing pressure. A woman stepped out, tall and confident in combat armor that looked both familiar and alien. Her weapon was holstered, her hands empty and open. Marcus Rivera, she asked. That's me. Captain Elizabeth Morrison, Indomitable Marine Corps. The Admiral sends her regards and requests a strategic meeting. Marcus stared at her. She looked young, maybe 30, but her eyes held something ancient. She had been born aboard the Indomitable, had lived her entire life knowing Earth only through stories and training simulations. Yet here she stood, ready to die for a world she had never seen. Welcome home, Captain, Marcus said, extending his hand. Elizabeth took it, and Marcus saw tears in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what those words mean to us. More pods opened, disgorging supplies, weapons, and soldiers. Within an hour, the Resistance had more military equipment than they had possessed in 3 centuries. Advanced rifles, body armor, communication gear, medical supplies. The Indomitable had brought everything, but it was what Elizabeth told them in the strategy meeting that made Marcus's blood run cold. The Zythians have sent for their sector fleet, she explained, displaying a holographic map. 300 ships, maybe more. They will arrive in 9 days, Maria Santos spoke up. Can the Indomitable handle that many? Elizabeth's expression was grim. No, we're good, but we're not miracle workers. The Admiral estimates we could take maybe 50 ships before being overwhelmed. 300? We would die. Then why stay? Asked one of the other resistance leaders. You could jump away, save yourselves. Because that's not who we are, Elizabeth said firmly. We came home to stay. If we die defending Earth, then we die. But we won't abandon you again. Marcus felt something break inside him. These people who had never walked on Earth's soil until today were willing to die for it. Meanwhile, he had led a resistance that had accomplished almost nothing in 3 centuries. What's the plan? He asked. Elizabeth smiled. We build a fleet. In 9 days. The room erupted in disbelief. Maria's voice cut through the noise. That's impossible. No, Elizabeth replied. It's just very, very difficult. And that's what humans do best. She explained Admiral Zhao's plan. The Indomitable carried manufacturing databases from a dozen alien civilizations. Complete blueprints for weapons, ships, and defensive systems. With those databases and Earth's industrial infrastructure, They could build a defensive fleet. Most of Earth's factories were destroyed in the invasion, Marcus protested. But Mars still has shipyards, Elizabeth countered, and Earth has raw materials. We have engineers aboard the Indomitable who can rebuild your factories in days instead of months. We've done this before. On alien worlds where we stop to resupply, we can do it here. In 9 days? Maria asked skeptically. We'll build what we can. Every ship helps. Every weapon platform matters. Elizabeth looked around the room. But we need your help. We need workers, engineers, anyone who can follow instructions. We need your people ready to fight because when that sector fleet arrives, it's going to be hell. Marcus made his decision. You'll have everything we can give you. The next 9 days transformed the Sol system. The Indomitable took up position in Earth orbit and became a mobile factory. Its fabricators worked around the clock, producing components that were shuttled down to rapidly rebuilt Earth factories. Sarah Chen found herself transferred from Mars to coordinate the orbital construction efforts. She watched in amazement as ships took shape in a matter of days. They weren't beautiful vessels. They were crude, functional, built for one purpose only: to fight. The designers called them system defense frigates. Each one was barely 100 meters long, with minimal crew space and maximum weapons. They wouldn't win any battles alone, but in groups they could provide supporting fire for the Indomitable. On Earth, the Resistance mobilized every able-bodied person. Former engineers returned to factories. Miners extracted raw materials. Construction workers built defensive platforms. The work was exhausting, dangerous, and necessary. Marcus found himself working alongside Captain Morrison, coordinating resistance cells and Indomitable forces. They planned attack strategies, evacuation routes, and defensive positions. Every conversation reminded him how far apart the two branches of humanity had grown. You speak differently, he told Elizabeth one night as they reviewed maps. Your words are Earth words, but the way you use them is strange. Elizabeth smiled sadly. We tried to preserve Earth culture aboard the ship, taught the old languages, the old customs, but 300 years in space changes people. We developed our own slang, our own expressions. We're human, but we're also something new. Are we still the same people? Marcus asked quietly. We're family, Elizabeth replied. That's what matters. Family doesn't abandon family. On the 5th day, Chief Engineer David Park made a discovery in the Indomitable's drive core. He called Admiral Zhao down to engineering, his face pale. Admiral, I think I know how we can even the odds, he said, displaying calculations on a screen. Catherine studied the numbers. This is the original jump drive malfunction. Yes, the one that threw us across the galaxy. I've been studying it for years, trying to understand what happened. David's fingers flew across the keyboard. It didn't just move us through space. It temporarily folded space-time around the ship. If we could control that fold, weaponize it, we could make enemy ships collide across folded space, Catherine finished. Make them crash into each other even though they're kilometers apart in real space. Exactly. But Admiral, it's dangerous. Really dangerous. If we miscalculate, we could fold space-time around ourselves. The Indomitable would be torn apart. Catherine looked at the calculations for a long moment. 300 ships versus 1. Without an advantage, they would lose. With this weapon, they had a chance. Build it, she ordered. But make sure it has multiple failsafes. I want to save Earth, not destroy our own ship trying. On the 8th day, the fleet was ready. 20 system defense frigates floated in formation around the Indomitable. It wasn't enough. Everyone knew it wasn't enough. But it was what they had built in impossible time with limited resources. Marcus stood in the Indomitable's shuttle bay, addressing the combined human forces. Resistance fighters and Indomitable soldiers stood together, a unified force for the first time in 3 centuries. Tomorrow the Zethians come, Marcus said. They come with overwhelming force. They expect to crush us easily, like they did 300 years ago. They think humans are weak, that we're prey animals to be hunted and enslaved. He looked across the faces before him, young and old, earthborn and shipborn, all united in purpose. They're wrong. Humans don't stay down. We get back up. We learn. We adapt. We survive. Our ancestors fought with primitive weapons against Zethian technology and still made them bleed. We fought guerrilla wars for 3 centuries, never surrendering, never giving up hope. And our brothers and sisters crossed the galaxy and came back stronger than ever. Marcus's voice grew louder. Tomorrow we show the Zethians what happens when they mistake mercy for weakness. We show them what humans can do when we stand together. And we show the galaxy that Earth is not conquered. Earth fights back. The room erupted in cheers. Earth resistance and indomitable forces shouted together, their voices joining in a sound that Earth hadn't heard in 300 years, the sound of human unity. That night, Sarah Chen stood at an observation window watching Earth turn below. Somewhere down there was the farm where her ancestors had lived before the invasion. Somewhere was the life humanity should have had. Tomorrow would decide if that life could be reclaimed. Admiral Catherine Zhao sat in her command chair, reviewing final preparations. 300 enemy ships against 21 human vessels and orbital defenses. The odds were terrible. The Zethians had more firepower, more ships, more of everything. But they didn't have what humans had. They didn't have desperation. They didn't have 300 years of suffering demanding justice. They didn't have the will to fight for every meter of space, to die if necessary, to ensure their children grew up free. Catherine looked at the countdown on her screen. 8 hours until the Zithian sector fleet arrived. All hands, she spoke into the ship-wide communication system. Battle stations. Prepare for combat. And remember, we are humanity's shield. We do not break. We do not surrender. We stand together and we win together. She closed the communication and looked at Commander Park. One way or another, Catherine said quietly. This ends tomorrow. Park nodded. One way or another, the countdown continued. Dawn was coming, and with it, the biggest battle humanity had fought in 300 years. The battle that would decide if Earth remained in chains or rose free once more. The Zethian sector fleet arrived like a storm. 300 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of Earth's sun. They came with absolute confidence, expecting to crush the human resistance in hours. Sector Admiral Vexthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical display. His scales were black with age, marking him as one of the oldest and most experienced commanders in the Dominion. He had conquered 12 worlds in his career. Earth would be just another victory. Analysis, he demanded. His tactical officer worked quickly. Enemy forces consist of 1 large capital ship and 20 smaller vessels. Orbital defense platforms around Earth and Mars. Total combat strength approximately 5% of our fleet. Vexthor's tail swished in satisfaction. The large ship is the one that destroyed Warlord Krixath's occupation fleet. Yes, Sector Admiral. It appears to be human in origin, though heavily modified. Then we will enjoy destroying it. Vexthor studied the formation. They cluster around their home planet like hatchlings around their mother. Predictable. All ships advance. Formation Theta. We will overwhelm them with coordinated fire. The Zithian fleet moved forward, a wall of steel and weapons designed to inspire fear. They had used this tactic countless times against countless enemies. The formation allowed them to concentrate devastating firepower while protecting each other's flanks. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Catherine Zhao watched the enemy approach with calm eyes. She had known they would use this formation. She had studied 300 years of Zithian military doctrine during the long journey home. Defensive positions, she ordered. All ships maintain formation around the Indomitable. Orbital platforms power to maximum. Let them come to us. Sarah Chen sat at a console on one of the orbital platforms above Earth, her hands steady despite the fear in her chest. The platform was essentially a weapons station with minimal shielding. If the Zethians targeted it directly, she would die in seconds. Platform 7 ready, she reported. All weapons charged. Around Earth, 19 other voices made similar reports. 20 platforms, each armed with weapons built using indomitable technology in just 9 days. They weren't elegant, but they would hurt. On Earth's surface, Marcus Rivera stood in a command bunker with Elizabeth Morrison and his resistance fighters. Their role in this battle was simple. If the Indomitable fell, they would make the Zithians pay in blood for every meter of ground. Here they come, Elizabeth said, watching the tactical display. The Zethian fleet entered weapons range and opened fire. 300 ships launching simultaneously created a wave of destruction that lit up space like a second sun. Energy beams and missiles filled the void, all targeted at the Indomitable and its small fleet. The Indomitable's shields flared to life, and the system defense frigates added their own shields to create overlapping defensive layers. The technology they used cycled through frequencies faster than Zethian weapons could adapt, but there were too many attacks. Some got through. One frigate exploded as a missile penetrated its shield. Another lost power as an energy beam carved through its engine. The Indomitable itself shuddered as multiple hits struck its shields. Shield strength at 70%, reported the tactical officer. Frigate Defiance destroyed. Frigate Courage heavily damaged. Catherine's face remained calm. All ships return fire. Target their formation center. Show them what we learned in the dark. The human fleet fired back. The Indomitable's main batteries, upgraded with technology from a dozen species, launched beams that punched through Zythian shields like they were paper. The frigates added their own fire, concentrating on specific targets. 5 Zethian ships exploded in the first exchange. 7 more lost shields. The neat formation wavered as ships tried to adjust. Orbital platforms, fire on my mark, Catherine ordered. Target coordinates being transmitted now. Sarah received the targeting data and locked onto a Zethian battleship that had moved too close to Earth. Platform 7 locked on target. All platforms, fire, Catherine commanded. 20 orbital platforms fired simultaneously. The concentrated firepower struck the Zethian battleship from multiple angles. Its shields collapsed, its hull breached, and it began spinning out of control toward Earth's atmosphere. But the Zethians adapted quickly. They had numbers on their side. For every ship humanity destroyed, 3 more moved to take its place. The formation closed in, tightening like a noose. "Admiral, they're surrounding us," Commander Park reported. "If we stay in this position, they'll overwhelm our shields through sheer volume of fire." Catherine had expected this too. "Launch all fighters. Every wing. And Commander Park, signal Chief Engineer Park, it's time to use our special weapon." Deep in the Indomitable's engineering section, David Park received the signal. His hands moved across the controls of the experimental weapon system he had built. The same jump drive malfunction that had thrown them across the galaxy, now weaponized and controlled. "Weapon charging," he reported. 30 seconds to ready." The Indomitable's hangar bays opened and fighters poured out by the hundreds. They weren't trying to engage the enemy directly. Instead, they moved through the Zethian formation like needles drawing fire, forcing the enemy ships to adjust their positions. Vexthor watched the fighters with growing anger. "Ignore the small craft. Focus all fire on the capital ship." But his fleet was already reacting, ships turning to track the fast-moving fighters. The perfect formation began to break apart, ships moving out of position. "Now, Chief Park," Catherine ordered. David activated the weapon. Space itself rippled around the Indomitable. Reality folded, bent, twisted. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Then 5 Zethian ships that had been separated by kilometers of space suddenly occupied the same point. They merged together in a catastrophic explosion that lit up the battle space. The shockwave threw nearby Zethian vessels off course. "Again," Catherine commanded. "Keep folding space around enemy clusters." The weapon fired again and again. Each time, Zethian ships found themselves colliding with each other across folded space-time. The carefully planned formation dissolved into chaos as ships tried to avoid an invisible threat. Sarah watched from her platform, barely believing what she was seeing. The Zethians had brought overwhelming force, but the Indomitable was turning their numbers against them. "Platform 7, fire at will," she called out. "Target the ships trying to regroup." The orbital platforms hammered the scattered Zethian formation. Without their coordinated defense, individual ships became vulnerable. The system defense frigates, small and quick, darted in to finish off damaged vessels. But the battle was far from won. The Zethians still had over 250 ships, and they were learning. Vexthor ordered his fleet to spread out, making it harder for the space-time weapon to affect multiple ships at once. "All ships, maximum dispersal," he commanded. Small unit tactics. "Overwhelm them from all sides." The Zethian fleet broke into smaller groups, attacking from dozens of directions. The human defenses began to strain. Another frigate exploded. Orbital platforms went silent as Zethian fire destroyed them. The Indomitable's shields were down to 40%. "We can't hold this forever," Commander Park said grimly. Catherine checked her displays. They had destroyed maybe 40 Zethian ships. Not enough. The enemy still had overwhelming numbers, and the space-time weapon was overheating. They had maybe 3 more shots before it needed to cool down. "Signal all resistance forces on Earth," Catherine ordered. "If the Indomitable falls, they need to evacuate to the shelters." "We can't—" "Admiral!" The communication officer interrupted. I'm picking up new FTL signatures. Multiple contacts emerging from jump space. Catherine's head snapped toward the display. New ships were appearing at the edge of the system. Lots of them. The communication officer's hands flew across his console. Admiral, they're broadcasting identification codes. They're human ships. Catherine's breath caught. How many? 150 vessels and counting, Admiral. They're from the other refugee fleets. 300 years ago, humanity had scattered across the stars in dozens of desperate refugee fleets. The Indomitable had been the largest, but not the only one. Some had been lost. Others had struggled to survive on distant worlds, but some had thrived just as the Indomitable had, and now they had heard the call. Humanity was returning home. The new fleet was diverse. Ships of different designs, built by different communities using different alien technologies. But they all flew the same flag, the blue and white of United Earth. A voice crackled over the communication system, speaking English with an accent Catherine had never heard before. This is Fleet Admiral Chen of the New Horizon Fleet. We heard your call. We came as fast as we could. Earth stands together. Another voice joined in. Fleet Admiral Rodriguez of the Far Star Fleet. Give us targets and we'll make them regret attacking our homeworld. More voices. More fleets. 150 ships became 170, then 200. Humanity's children scattered across the galaxy, coming home. Marcus Rivera listened to the transmissions from his bunker on Earth, tears streaming down his face. Elizabeth Morrison stood beside him, her own eyes wet. They came, she whispered. They all came. On his flagship, Vexthor watched in growing horror as more and more human vessels appeared. His fleet still had numerical superiority, but not. The silence after the battle felt strange. For the first time in 300 years, no Zethian warships controlled Earth's orbit. The planet turned peacefully below, scarred but free. Admiral Catherine Zhao stood before the main view screen, watching as the various human fleets moved into stable orbits. 170 ships from a dozen different refugee groups, each with their own story of survival. She had thought the Indomitable was alone. She had been wrong. Admiral Chen is requesting permission to dock, Commander Park reported. Granted. Send the same invitation to all fleet commanders. It's time we met face to face. 2 hours later, Catherine stood in the Indomitable's main conference room, looking at men and women she had never met, but somehow knew. They all had the same look in their eyes, the same determination born from centuries of struggle. Admiral Chen was a small woman with white hair and hands scarred from decades of work. Her fleet had fled toward the galactic core and found shelter on a mining world, trading labor for protection from the local aliens. They had built their ships from salvaged parts and stolen technology. Admiral Rodriguez was younger, his dark skin marked with ritual tattoos that told stories Catherine couldn't read. His fleet had survived by becoming mercenaries, fighting in alien wars to gather resources and knowledge. Every ship in his fleet bore the marks of 100 battles. There were others. Admiral Okonkwo, whose people had hidden in an asteroid field for a century before emerging. Admiral Zhang, whose fleet had discovered an abandoned alien station and turned it into a fortress. Captain Williams, who commanded the last survivors of 3 different fleets that had merged together. Each one had a story. Each one had suffered, and each one had come when Earth called. Thank you, Catherine said simply. Thank you for coming, Admiral Chen smiled. We're family. Family doesn't abandon family. The same words Elizabeth Morrison had said to Marcus Rivera. Perhaps some truths transcended distance and time. What's the situation on Earth? Admiral Rodriguez asked. The Zethian ground forces are still there, Catherine replied. But they're demoralized. They saw their fleet broken. They know reinforcements won't come quickly. Marcus Rivera is coordinating with resistance cells to pressure them. We should land troops, Admiral Okonkwo said. Clean them out properly, Catherine nodded. Agreed, but carefully. The Zethians might try to use human hostages. We need to be precise. For the next week, the liberation of Earth continued. Human soldiers from a dozen fleets landed on the surface, joining the resistance fighters. They moved carefully through the ruined cities, freeing labor camps and pushing back Zethian forces. The Zethians fought in some places, fled in others. Some tried to negotiate surrender. Catherine offered terms. Leave Earth peacefully and you live. Stay and fight and you die. Most chose to leave. Marcus Rivera led forces into what used to be New York City, where the main Zethian command center stood. Elizabeth Morrison fought beside him, the Earthborn and shipborne humans working together seamlessly now. They found the command center abandoned. The Zethian leaders had fled on the last transport ships, leaving their soldiers behind. Those soldiers surrendered without a fight. It's over, Maria Santos said, standing in the command center and looking at the abandoned equipment. After 300 years, it's finally over. Marcus thought about all the people who had died waiting for this moment. All the resistance fighters who gave their lives hoping their children might see freedom. They hadn't lived to see this day, but their sacrifice had made it possible. Send a message to all cells, Marcus said. Earth is free. On Mars, Sarah Chen watched from her station as the last Zethian ships left the system. They limped away, damaged and defeated, carrying news that would shake the Zethian dominion. Humanity wasn't defeated. Humanity had returned. Sarah, a voice crackled over her communication system. You should come down to Earth. There's something you need to see. She took a shuttle down, landing near what used to be her family's farm. The land was scarred and empty, but people were already beginning to rebuild. Humans who had survived the occupation were coming out of hiding, joining with the freed slaves and the shipborne humans. A child ran past Sarah, laughing. She couldn't remember the last time she had heard a child laugh on Earth. The sound was beautiful. 2 months after the battle, Admiral Catherine Zhao finally set foot on Earth's surface for the first time in her life. She had been born aboard the Indomitable, had lived her entire 50 subjective years in space. Earth had been a dream, a story, a distant goal. Now she stood on soil, real soil, and looked up at a sky that wasn't a ceiling. The gravity felt strange after a lifetime of artificial gravity. The wind on her face was something she had only experienced in simulations. Marcus Rivera met her at the landing site, along with representatives from all the various human groups. Earthborn, shipborne, former slaves, resistance fighters, everyone who had fought for this moment. Welcome home, Admiral, Marcus said. Catherine smiled. It's good to be home. They walked together through a field that was beginning to grow green again. Nature was reclaiming the land the Zethians had scarred. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we rebuild, Catherine replied. Not just Earth, we rebuild humanity. We bring together all the scattered fleets, all the lost colonies. Everyone who fled during the invasion. We become one people again. And the Zethians? Catherine's expression hardened. The Zethians made a mistake. They thought they could break humanity. They thought we were weak because we fled. But running away isn't weakness when you come back stronger. Over the following months, more refugee fleets arrived. Some had been searching for Earth for centuries. Others had given up hope of ever returning. But the word spread across the galaxy. Earth was free. Humanity was calling its children home. The Indomitable became the center of a growing fleet. Engineers from various human groups shared their knowledge, combining technologies learned from dozens of alien species. They built new ships, better ships, using the best of everything humanity had learned during its exile. Sarah Chen found herself promoted to coordinator of orbital construction. She oversaw the building of proper orbital stations, not the crude platforms they had thrown together for the battle. Earth was getting its infrastructure back. Marcus Rivera worked with the other resistance leaders to form a planetary government. It wasn't easy. 300 years of separation had created different cultures, different ways of thinking, but they shared the same goal: ensure this never happened again. 1 year after the liberation, representatives from all human groups gathered in a rebuilt assembly hall in Geneva. They came to make decisions about humanity's future. Admiral Catherine Zhao stood before them, no longer just the commander of the Indomitable, but the elected leader of the United Earth Defense Force. 300 years ago, we were broken, she said. We were scattered across the stars, refugees running from an enemy we couldn't defeat. We lost our home. We lost billions of people. We lost our unity. She paused, looking across the assembly. But we didn't lose everything. We didn't lose our humanity. We didn't lose our ability to adapt, to learn, to survive. And we never forgot where we came from. Today, Earth is free. Our people are returning home. We're stronger than we were before the invasion. We have technology from across the galaxy. We have experience fighting and surviving in hostile space. We have something the Zethians never expected. Unity born from shared suffering. Catherine's voice grew stronger. The Zithian Dominion still exists. They still control dozens of worlds. They still enslave other species. They think we're a minor inconvenience, a small defeat they can ignore. They're wrong. She gestured to the assembly. We're not going to sit on Earth and wait for them to attack again. We're going to take the fight to them. We're going to free the other species they've enslaved. We're going to show the galaxy what humanity can do when we stand together. Earth was our cradle, but it was never our cage. The galaxy tried to break us, and instead it made us stronger. Now we return to that galaxy not as refugees, but as liberators. The assembly erupted in cheers. Earthborn and shipborn humans stood together, united in purpose. The various fleet admirals raised their fists in solidarity. The resistance fighters who had suffered through 3 centuries of occupation shouted their approval. Outside the assembly hall, construction crews worked on new ships. Scientists studied alien technology in laboratories. Soldiers trained in tactics learned from a dozen different human communities. Farmers planted crops in soil that was slowly healing. Earth was alive again. On the Indomitable, Chief Engineer David Park worked with his counterparts from other fleets to improve the space-time weapon. What had been a desperate gambit in battle was becoming a refined technology. The Zithians would face it again, and next time humanity would use it with precision and purpose. Elizabeth Morrison stood on a hill overlooking New York City, watching the reconstruction. She had been born on a ship, raised on stories of Earth. Now she was home, really home. Her children would grow up here on solid ground under a real sky. Marcus Rivera joined her. "Thinking about the future?" he asked. "Thinking about how far we've come," she replied. "A year,